Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and today we are coming to you with another Fireside Chat episode where I get to have just a great conversation with my executive assistant, Svetlana Lane. So, Svetlana, thank you for making time to do this again with me so we can have this conversation where we're going to talk about how to value your services and how to create the business that you actually want when you have to earn, when you have to make money and you're the one who pays the bills, right? Like as entrepreneurs, we have a lot of um, usually we create a business for a lot of reasons. One of them being we want to do something that we actually care about, that we're passionate about, that we want to, make an impact in the world around. And then the reality of having to actually pay for our life and pay for the business can sometimes turn into something that, like makes you not love the thing that you actually do love doing. And I've seen it over and over with different, different service providers, different business owners, all different industries. It's a really, really common thing. So thank you for being here. And let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been experiencing, and because it's such a good example of this whole thing.
Yes. So my story is that a few years ago, I started a music studio out of my home and built it up with private lesson clients. And it got to a point where I started dreaming about having a space where I could offer more group class experiences because my background is teaching in the schools. And I just loved that environment of teaching a class and everybody participating in that group, you know, camaraderie and environment. Well, so therefore, I got an opportunity. I found a perfect location space to rent, and I moved into a brick and mortar, which of course increased my costs significantly. And I actually did not raise my prices. I just kept chugging. I wore myself so thin, trying to bring up the brick and mortar to to operation, and but also continue to teach everybody at the same time, and it was very stressful. So finally, with the fall season coming up and the school restarting, I decided I definitely need to raise my prices because i I just had to keep it sustainable. Otherwise, why would I be doing this? I could go back to teaching at home. It was so much easier. But to me, I wanted to build something that was bigger than me. I want something that I can eventually even sell, once I get it really well systemized, and it's something that I see something bigger that can happen from having a brick and mortar. But anyway, so I had to raise my prices, and I've actually went to therapy for at least a month. I have been mulling this with over this
Hmm.
with my therapist because it was such a scary thing for me to think that how it was scary because I was afraid people were going to reject me. And I've had a
Yeah.
lot of rejection in my life. So this is just a wound in general that I struggle about anything, but this especially was something that I really, really struggled with. And I didn't raise them that much, I mean, per hour, really.
No.
But I think maybe what was happening in my mind too is being my own sole provider. It's just me, and providing for me and my daughter. And I'm an immigrant. I came to America when I was 8, like straight up off the boat, or the airplane. And I don't have big inheritances that I can kind of pull from if I need. I don't have anything. It's just me. in the daily grind, providing for me and my daughter. And I think the fear is, I know what that's like to live on that, and that live
Mhm.
month to month right now as I'm getting things growing. And so I, in a sense, almost project that on my clients
Mhm.
and assume they're also living like that. And they're going to be really stretched, and it's just been an interesting situation. But I did end up raising my prices. I announced it like maybe last week, and I made it very kind of innocuous. My announcement was very innocuous. And I said, here's the new policy, here's our new schedule, we're done. And nobody really reached out except one person, one family. And I was fine with keeping their old price. I made an exception for them. And that's basically all that happened. And so, what do you think about all that?
Yes, yes. Thank you. First, thank you for sharing that story because it's so relatable, right? Like it truly is something that so many entrepreneurs go through, is this this need to balance what, what matters to you, again, what you want to do in the world, the impact you want to make, and then like, okay, the reality is I need to make, this amount of dollars, whatever that amount is, to provide for my family and to make sure the business can keep going. Right, so that there's a monthly number that is necessary, and then beyond that, right, if you go beyond that, that's where you can start saving for that cash reserve or start, putting away money for retirement or later in life or whatever that looks like, or looking, to expand, right? Like, it there you have to hit that first number, though. Like, what do we need to live as a family, and what does the business need to support itself? And that internal fear of, if I raise my prices, like, what's the catastrophic thought? What catastrophic thought went with that for you? If I raise my prices, then what? Like, if you go all the way to the end, what was the thought for you?
People will leave me. And when people leave me, it really hurts. That
Mhm.
was my personal.
Yeah. Yeah, and that rejection wound, that abandonment wound,
Yeah.
uh, is at the root of so many people's fear to raise
Hmm.
prices, because the catastrophizing isn't just, "Oh, if I raise my prices, someone might leave." The catastrophizing says, "If I raise my prices, everyone will leave.
Yeah.
It will
That's
all
it.
fall apart."
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Which, when we look at it logically, that it doesn't even make sense to think that. But we're not, like, when we're in that kind of, like, emotional, the fear response of it, there's no logic there.
Mm-hmm.
Or the logic that we can do, like the negative, the downward spiral, like, "Oh, sure, that totally makes sense," right? Like, we convince ourselves that it does make sense
Oh,
to
yeah.
take that negative spiral.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. My brain starts braining.
Mhm.
Yeah. A lot of fear. Yeah.
And
Which is
so
interesting because, the evidence has shown in the past, I've raised my prices before, actually probably more per hour than I did this time. And um, and nobody batted an eye then. It's funny because I've done it before, and yet
Mhm.
this is like a new. Maybe it feels like I'm pushing the limits or something, you know.
Yes,
um,
yeah.
I've already raised my prices, and now I'm raising them again, and maybe there's some of that too. But yeah, it's still the same very real fear.
Yeah. And so when that happens, when you're feeling that fear, and then, talk to your therapist. I know we talked about it too.
Yeah.
Partially because, like, two of my kids take lessons
Mhm.
with you, and you're like, what would it be like if I raised my prices? And in our conversation, when you were like, "Well, I'm thinking about raising it from this to this," it was like I wanna say a 15 or $20 change per month. Um, and
15. It's literally 15 per
15
month.
yeah, $15 per month. There we go. That's what I thought. I'm like, it was not, and when you told
Like,
that to me, I was like, "Okay,
okay,
yes."
no, no. What happened was I said, Hannah, do you think it would be okay if I raised them $10 a month? And you're like, what about 15?
Yes, that's right. I'm glad you remember.
It
Uh,
was $15 a month. I mean, and I was having anxiety over 10. So like 15 was such a, I mean,
mhm.
wow, that's like nothing anymore these days in our economy, but maybe that's why it feels, I don't know, so much.
Yeah. Well, and even percentage-wise, right? Percentage-wise, it was not a big percentage change either.
Oh, no.
Um,
It was 10%?
maybe.
10%. Yeah.
Yeah.
15. Okay, yeah, it was because I was charging what, like 155. And then so
Yeah.
adding 15 to that.
Little less than 10%.
Yeah.
Right. And I can relate, um, in a lot of ways because
Mm,
I've gone through this as well. And where I see this really come up, so when I first started X Squared, I knew that I wanted to work with people on, you know, financial planning is the basis of what I do. It's where I always start. I don't take on investment planning clients that aren't interested in the financial planning side. I just don't think it works that way. And then when I do have clients where it's really hard to get a hold of, where they don't want to meet with me, where I'm like, what are we doing here? Right. I'm not, things aren't moving in the direction that they need to flow when we don't actually get to connect more often. Um, so anyway, I knew that I wanted that to be like the way that I worked with people. And my initial, like in 2021, when I first started X Squared, it was, for me, I was like, okay, so I'm going to work on a retainer basis, and financial planning is going to have an ongoing retainer. And this is how I want to structure it. So that structure of meeting with my entrepreneurial clients once a month started in 2021, probably like halfway through. So I started doing that, and I started at $500 per month. That was gonna be the price to do the planning, the whole all the upfront, like doing the plan itself, that whole initial process, and then ongoing meetings. There was no upfront cost for that. Well, I started getting clients, and that at that price for what I was offering, which was basically coaching and, money coaching and like CFO light services and being like all of the personal and business financial planning, people were like, that's a steal. Of course I'm going to do that. So I started getting more and more clients. And at one point, I had about 5 clients starting right around the same time. And I was doing all of the financial planning for all of these clients at the same time. Now, mind you, the financial plan itself takes usually takes about 20 to 30 hours to complete between meeting, getting all the data, really digging into a client situation, and then creating the plan on the other side. I will be fully transparent that it takes me that's longer than some other people, other financial planners might say that you're spending way too much time. I have always spent a lot of time on the plan. I've always been extremely thorough. I've always been extremely detailed. I've always wanted it to be extremely useful for the person.
and I can attest to that because I have seen these plans and I'm like, what? Wow. Is true.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it's when I have seen other financial plans, the ones that take someone 5 or 6 hours to do, and I do not think they're useful. I don't think they're helpful. I don't think they give very good information that clients can understand and apply. So, I will fully admit, right? Like, yes, if it takes me 20 to 30 hours to do a plan, yeah, I'm spending a lot of time there. And then when I was doing this for $500 per month, just $500 to get started, right? And then, yeah, $500 per month. So I'm not saying it's cheap, and it wasn't cheap then either, but I was upfront spending 20 or 30 hours for $500 was what was happening. And that started to feel really bad. Like, I was burning out, I did not feel good, I was all like, even within a year, I was like, "I can't do this." And so my first initial, recommendation from my business coach at the time was like, why don't you have, like, an initial intake fee to do the plan itself?" Like, if you go to an accountant, if you go to a CPA, usually there's gonna be like, "Oh, right, we're gonna in order to get all your stuff into our system and to understand it, it's gonna be, 1,500, 3,000, $6,000, depending on how big your business is or how complicated it is. There's going to be that upfront fee, and people expect that because there's work on the front end. And so when it took me a while. It was very, very scary. So the same, like, fear that you're talking about, when I had to start, when I was meeting with people, meeting with prospects, and I had to tell them, "All right, it's gonna be" what did I settle on? I settled on, I think, $3,000 for that first, like, it's gonna be $3,000 to do the plan itself, and then $500 per month as an ongoing retainer. It was so scary. It was so scary to share that information with the first few people, and they said, people said yes. There were people that said no, and I was like, "Okay, that feels scary." The people said no, but the people that said yes, it was such like, I felt so much better in doing that work because it was like, I'm actually being compensated for this work that I'm doing that I love, that I know is so valuable. But I feel like there's actually, like, I have energy to do it because it doesn't feel so heavy. Um, and so I did that again, for I sold it a few times until it felt comfortable. And then again, I realized, like, all right, this is still too it's still not enough. Like, that's not the right price for this. And I increased it to 5,000. And again, sold that a few times. And that's what, like, so I've done this a few times. I've gone up to, 12 and $15,000 for that initial plan. It just depends on the complexity of the situation. And now I have a more complexity-based pricing that fluctuates. If it's a really simple case, starts out at 5. If it's a much more complicated case, it's 12 to 15, um, $1,000 for that initial plan and then ongoing, all of that. So just to say that I have been through this myself, and where I knew, like, it was that feeling of when I was starting to feel burned out, when I was starting to not want to do this anymore. Like, that was a real red flag for me to say, "Hey, something is wrong," because I love this. I love this work. I love working with people in this way, and something feels off about it. Um, and so for you, right, when you brought in the brick and mortar cost, now you have rent to pay. And to know, like, that was the thing for me hearing you when you were talking about it. It's like, yeah, you just added, like, thousands of dollars to the cost of your
Mhm.
life, but you didn't shift anything. It was
Mhm.
in your pricing, other than to start offering, like, offering group piano programs, offering other group programs.
Mhm.
And while, like, all right, we can look at some of those things, we can say that's gonna bring in a little bit more money, because you're literally having 8 or 10 students at a time, right? So it's
Mhm.
less, it's not so one-on-one, which is
Mhm.
super helpful to be able to scale, but it takes time for those group programs,
Yes.
right, to grow and for people to know about them, and all of that. And so this, being able to shift your pricing, being able to honor that feeling of, like, this doesn't this doesn't feel sustainable. I'm feeling it's too much for me to
Yeah.
do, right? Like, that's the bright red flag that's waving, that's saying, "Hey, we need to look at something."
Yeah, I love that. It's almost kind of like you have a gut check about the supply and demand. Like,
Mhm.
of demand, not enough supply to cover the demand. It almost, I don't know, kind of reminds me of that's what was
Absolutely.
coming up for me. When
Yes, because and in that example, what is the supply and what is the demand?
mhm.
Like, what is the supply from your end? What are you supplying?
the the I'm supplying the lessons and the space.
Right? And then what and, like, what are you spending? Like, this was for me the big thing too. It's your time and energy,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, like, yes, and you're supplying the space for sure too, and other people have expressed interest in that, like, "Oh, I'd love to teach in your space."
Mhm.
Great, let's talk about that. Let's talk about a fair price for that.
Mhm.
But when you are the service provider, like, you are the teacher for a lot of this, um, or when you're working, in your capacity as an executive assistant, right? Like, your time and your energy are the supply that you have to draw from.
Mhm. Yes. Right. Yes. That's really good. And interestingly, I felt like I still needed permission, to raise my prices. I went to you, and I know like my therapist will say, go to the source. I like people, so I went to you because I know you coach entrepreneurs and you're just so wise in that department. And but also you see my value as a parent and you see
Mhm,
how I teach as well. And I think that helped me. You're kind of all encompassing with um, as a businesswoman and as a client of mine. But yeah, I went to several people, and I almost kind of needed that permission of sorts to do this, and I'm reflecting on that. Wondering like I guess that's okay. Everybody's journey is different. Like have you ever I guess my question is have you pulled your clients before or you just kind of went with what felt good to you?
um, so there is some data, and I know there's some data for you as well about,
Mhm.
what's quote unquote "average," in the financial planning world and in lessons, like in private lessons, right?
Yes.
Or even working as an executive assistant, right? There are some norms and averages,
Right.
in all of these areas, and so I think there is wisdom in asking the people who will be paying for your service, right? There is some, really valuable information that can be gleaned from that.
Mhm.
One of my other clients does market research for, companies and helps them
Yeah.
figure out this kind of stuff. And so he was asking me when we started, he's like, do you know where you are like in the averages? Like what are other people charging? And I shared with him like, I do know. I do know some of the averages. Kind
Mhm.
of the average across the industry with financial planning, when we're talking personal financial planning that doesn't touch any business stuff. I'm gonna be very clear about that. That average is around $2,500. It could be per plan or it could be per year. That's kind of like the nationwide average. And so I said, like, I am not trying to pretend that I
Yeah.
am average. And there's like, there,
Yeah.
in
And
that,
that's the thing, you're not at all what you offer and the human design perspective of it and your it's such deep insight into the entrepreneurship aspect. Absolutely.
right. And so sharing the fact that, like, hey, you know what? I do know what industry average is. I also know literally in the city that I'm in, I'm not the highest priced advisor.
Mhm.
And I know that because I know those people. Like, I've
Yeah.
talked with them, right? There's another advisor that, charges 8 to $10,000 per year for planning. Um, and she doesn't I mean, she works with some business owners, but that's just like across the board. That's like her
Yeah.
minimum. Um, so I'm lower than that. Um, and that's just in Cincinnati here. If you go to New York, if you go to California, if you go to some of these other areas, right, like pricing is even higher. So
Mhm.
on a continuum side, like I know I'm not like the national average, I'm not the low side of average, but I also know for a fact that I am not the highest priced that I've even met in person. Um,
Mhm.
and so like having an idea of I'm gonna say competition, but anyone who listens to this podcast knows I don't like actually believe in competition. But
Right.
knowing the market
Yeah.
is one
The
thing.
range.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Kind of where you sit in the range. Um, for you, one of the other things that's really special is that you use different methodology, right?
Yeah.
You are trained in ORF methodology and like some different ways of teaching besides the fact that you were an actual classroom teacher as well. Um, that not all lesson teachers understand or they don't work with students in that same
Mhm.
capacity. And I know so for
Oh, yeah.
me, like as a parent, like you were saying, that's what my kids need. My kids
Mhm.
need someone who is more flexible, who is not like, "Hey, we're gonna get you into Juilliard when they're 9," right? Like, that's not the point right now. The point is to learn to love music,
Yes.
right? Or to make a connection, make like an internal connection with the music. Um, and so that supply, even that supply, if we look at supply in that regard, there are very few teachers like you in the whole area.
Absolutely. There's no music school in the area that has current state teaching licensure, you know, all the different certifications with the ORF and the Dalcroze and Suzuki, all that. Yeah, I know for sure. I can tell you how I'm different. My experience, even in working with music therapy, I've had internships in the past that were with a music therapy organization, and I've done a lot of work with neurodivergent and populations and all sorts of abilities. And so I know that, it's I can justify it all day long, and yet like logically, but yeah,
Right.
this is interesting emotionally how it's so hard to even accept that about my service. It's such an interesting situation. But I had a thought that came up. So you and Marla on another episode were talking about how to sell two different kinds of human designs.
Mhm.
And the splenic type, you were saying, oftentimes will like kind of know the decision, but then they kind of start wavering a little bit. They need some time, right? And it's interesting because before you even said, well, would you raise it to 170? Like 6 weeks ago, I decided I need to be at 170, and my whole body lit up. My whole body was like, 170 is the special number. And everything just felt so good. But then when I like drafted my new policy and I put that number in, that people pleasing side
Mhm.
started doubting what
Mhm.
felt good inside, my body initially. And I just think that just from learning that from you guys in that conversation, looking back and seeing what really happened to me, kind of very exactly what you described.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that you
Yeah.
brought that into the conversation. So you are a splenic projector,
Mhm.
right? So there's like a lot of that's special about that in general. But yeah, the splenic authority is a very like present moment. Usually it's not necessarily a gut reaction. The way that I've heard people describe it that have splenic authority, it's more like a body
Mhm.
sensation. It's either a body sensation of dread and no, or a body sensation of like goosebumps and
It's
yes.
the most thrilling, yeah,
So I
thing.
love that. I love that explanation from you, um, being splenic. And because you've also talked in the past about not like having disconnected from that for so long. Right,
Yes.
like not listening to your intuition, disconnecting from that, and the spleen is our center of intuition, and so for
Oh.
you to that's hilarious, I don't think you told me that,
No, I never did. This is
no,
the
because then
first
when we
time
had the
confessing on a public podcast.
I love it, because then the
Yeah.
conversation we had, right, was like, you said, "What if it's $10?" And I came back, "What if it's 15?" Which got you right back to that exact 170.
Yeah, I know. The universe was like, I'm gonna bring Hannah here.
Right? She's gonna confirm this
Set
for
you
you, and
back.
she's not even gonna know it. Yeah, I think that's so amazing, um, because that's, again, just, like, confirmation
Yeah.
coming in. Confirmation of your intuition.
Yeah, yeah, and trusting that. I think there it is again. I did not grow up. I grew up not like being taught not to trust myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's oh my god, we could do so much, on that, the religious trauma that comes from
Yeah.
you're bad inside and you're not allowed to trust
Yeah.
yourself, right? Like, that's literally the messaging when you peel off all the flowery stuff. It's, "No, you're a bad sinner. You're a horrible person. You can't trust yourself."
You can't trust yourself. Yes, it
Right? The
really
heart the heart will deceive you, right? Like, all of that
exactly. Yep.
messaging. And
Yep.
so, if we don't reprogram ourselves,
Yeah. Yep.
that's what we keep believing. So, when Marla and I were talking on that episode, um, which isn't that far back, if you're hearing this, you wanna go listen, it was a
Yeah,
great
it's
episode.
the exploring the no in sales episode.
Thank you.
You're
Yes, it was
welcome.
loved it. Each human design authority makes decisions differently, and so part of that is, um, you know, helping helping the person across from you get to that place where they're trusting themselves. And so for you, with a splenic response, it's not necessarily that it's like a flash and then goes away forever, because
Mm-hmm.
you got that hit again from me, right? So what did that
Mm-hmm.
feel like when I said, "What if you do 170?" Did that feel did how did that feel in your
Yes.
body?
I was like relieved that you took me back to that place, that I had
Yeah.
permission to feel that again
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Yes, and so what I'm trying to get to here is that you'll get that confirmation again, right? It'll come
Mhm.
back,
Yeah.
when you're presented with that again, but when it goes away, when the moment fades, that's when the mind is gonna, like, take over, right? And
Yeah.
that's when you're gonna the doubts, the fears, the what ifs, because the splenic sensation of it is gonna have died down,
Mhm.
and it's not necessarily as pervasive as, like, a sacral gut feeling, or the emotional wave that has to think about the highs and think about the lows. Okay, what happens if I raise my prices? Well, all of these, I'll be able to hire someone else. I'll have more room in my budget, right? Things will be a little easier. What are the negatives? Well, some people could leave if it doesn't work for them, or, you know, really that's the only downside of that. Because again, you weren't raising your prices by double, right?
Mhm.
You weren't making that big of a change. So, but that, the emotional authority is gonna go through all those possibilities and feel into them. But for you, yeah, it's that initial sense is so, so important.
Mhm.
And then to notice what thoughts are coming up that are then trying to negate you from that
Yes.
initial feeling of yes.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. I like how you went through some of the different styles to help others kind of realize maybe how they can, well, how they'll process it.
Yeah. Yes, I have another client who she's a sacral authority manifesting generator, and she is totally practicing this right now of like, I'm just like, I'm not making any decisions. I'm just letting things come to me, and if it's a yes, I'm gonna keep going, and if it's a no, it's gonna be a no, and it's okay. And so,
Mhm.
like, for her, like, it takes practice, and it takes, like, intentionality to trust that
Right.
and to move from that, right? So
Yes.
that was where you got stuck, was like, I feel it. I got that hit of like, that's the right thing.
Mhm.
But then it's like everything that gets in the way of the action part of actually taking action.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It is really, really hard to actually. Oh, it took me weeks, weeks,
Mhm.
just to type in three different numbers in the policy papers. Like Yeah, but yeah, that was a huge hurdle for me. But it's getting, every time will get easier. And then also just remembering, uh, every time that there is a no, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, vice versa. So if somebody does back out, it's creating room in your business to be more creative and to try other new things and opportunities and work with new clients, right? It's if I think about if I were just stuck on the initial, 40 clients that I had from the very beginning, I wouldn't have met all these new people that have walked through the doors
Yeah.
um and just letting that kind of life breathe in and out in the business. I think what I just want to hold on and
Mm.
homeostasis stasis. Like I want everything. There's a part of my brain that just wants stability, and
Right.
sometimes I think to me that's where some of my fear comes from too. Is like it's not stable if people leave, and now I have um,
Yeah.
that is interesting. Just
Yeah.
processing that with you here, online therapy,
There we
podcast
go. Right.
therapy.
Your podcast
But
therapy for the day.
but I hope other people can kind of resonate with that, and when they hear that. But also, just how would you advise with dealing with rejection as well? How would you what how have you processed it in your business, and maybe you've seen other clients process when clients do leave? What would you
Hmm.
say to that?
So I have had a lot of chances to process this on my own. Um, the most recent being, a client that left just this week. So this is new. So I don't think maybe you saw in the email. I don't know.
I think I
Um,
did.
right. And my initial so in the first couple of years, in the first year really, again, like just like everyone else, I was building, I was, had expenses of getting the business started, and it would feel it would feel scary if someone would leave, partly because, when someone's paying $500 per month, and let's say you have, $5,000 of recurring revenue, $500 is 10%. Right, and so now it's down to 4,500. If someone else leaves, now it's down to 4,000, right? So it's like it moves the needle really quickly on, like, the feeling of, "Am I gonna be okay?" when there's not a ton of clients, and it's really like, um, that's what you have, right? So in the exact situation that you were talking about at the beginning, and so in the beginning, like, having having the experience of having clients leave, or need to stop for whatever reason, that was my I was going through a lot of personal work, and really dealing with this rejection wound and abandonment wound and, um, in myself, right? And so what I literally did was take it as an opportunity to practice releasing someone with love. And to, take care of myself first. So I was doing so much inner child work, in 2021 that, like, that was I still felt rejected. I still felt that fear of like, "Oh shit, is it gonna be okay?" Um, and it was this sense of, okay, rather than in fear, responding in fear would have been like, "Is there anything like, can you tell me, what went wrong? Is there anything I can do to make it right? Or is there anything, I can do to make you stay?" Right? Like, in anything in that feeling of, like, holding on to, like, clinging to that, I let myself process that first. Like, what's coming up here? What's really coming up here? And let myself be with that, process it, um, feel the sadness, feel that fear, comfort my inner child that was freaking out, and then when I was at a more neutral, like, get the emotions out, so it also, like, literally, like, shaking it out and, like, moving through all of that, then I would be able to sit down and respond. And that response was, people get to choose. People have free choice, right? And it was never a matter of, "I don't like you. I don't think you're a good person." Right? That was never the issue. It was, like, I just don't have I don't see where I have this in my budget anymore, or something else happened and I can't, like, whatever the reasoning was. Um, that wasn't necessarily any of my business. It was just the fact that it was no longer a good fit, and they made the choice to leave.
Mhm.
And I've had most of the time, the several times I've had clients who came with me, or came over, after I started, found out that I left, and then, like, called me and were like, "How do I come with you?" Right? A lot of those clients were not actually in the target demographic that I have been talking to for the last 4 years at this point. And again, kind of in that same vein of, like, not liking to meet, not proactive, not wanting to, um, actually be involved in the process the way that I do it now. And so when they would choose to leave or try something else, for me, that was like, "Oh, this is actually people self-selecting out that actually don't fit with the way that I do business anymore." And so when it happens now, so literally Monday or Tuesday, it's Wednesday, yesterday, I get a notice that a client is transferring their assets out. And this client, well, it's so I think he's wonderful. I think he's a super nice person. Um, he refuses basically to meet with me, right? And we reach out all the time to have meetings, and we put meetings on the schedule, and he cancels them. And so there's, like, this part of me that says, this is that, we're making space. This is taking energy. This is taking, um, this is taking time to go through, to chase after. It doesn't feel good to have to chase a client down to help them the way they're asking to be helped. And that's not the energy that I work with anymore. And for him to then say, well, it could have been around pricing, it could have been around anything. Um, for him to choose to go somewhere else is actually, for me, a really good thing, because now, even though it's gonna reduce my income for a hot minute, I literally have other clients. I have another client starting tomorrow. I have,
Mhm.
a brand new client that got 2 meetings left within our initial process. I've got other people, other prospects who are like, okay, just waiting until September or October to get started.
Yeah.
And they found me from exactly, like, me saying the things that matter to me, talking about human design, talking about money stories, talking about the connection between, emotional health and financial health, right? They're coming to me from that lane rather than from anywhere else. And so,
Yeah.
literally, the way that you're saying, like, this is making room. This client leaving, though they're a very nice person, and I have absolutely appreciated the journey that we've been on so far, and the support, like, literally the financial support that I had while building my business
Yeah.
by working with them as a client,
Yep.
and giving them, everything that I could. They're now leaving and making room for what is supposed to be here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Um, keep on quoting my therapist today, but she said, she said in therapy, especially, she'll have clients that come and go too. I mean, that's just normal in a service. This is a
Mhm,
normal service-based business experience. Clients come and go,
mhm,
but she said when some ways that she processes that is she'll say, "I have filled their cup. Their cup is
yeah.
full." And I think that's a beautiful way to try to let go.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's important too to to acknowledge that, in private lessons, in financial planning, if you're a CPA, or a bookkeeper, these different kind of service-based businesses, therapist, um, we tend to have maybe less in therapy. Maybe people are a little more like cycle through a little more there. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But these other businesses, they tend to be sticky, right? We tend to have clients that are recurring.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more long term than other service-based businesses where it's like a one-time service, right? And so it's like this dance between stability and kinda like you said, like new breathing new life in, right?
Hmm.
Like you said, if you kept all 40 of your initial clients and didn't ever change, like, how weird would that be?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it doesn't actually
Totally
work.
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But in
So
my mind, that's, my subconscious, that's what it wants. It's
mhm.
interesting how we expect that. Even though it doesn't it's not logical, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is true. It's like once we can, um and I talk about this quite a bit just in general, but once we can be truly grateful
Mhm.
for I love the way your therapist put it, right? You've filled their cup. They're good. Like that's the interactions that they needed, they received, and now they are ready for something else. Once you can be truly, truly grateful for the journey and that this person is like even if it's say it's to go to another teacher, right? Like you have some things that you can teach for a really long time and other things that like, okay, when you hit a certain level, like you need to go to
Yep.
someone who's like specialized in this area.
Which I have done with like 4, 5 kids. I got you
Mm.
to this point, and it's time for you to go really study with a master, on this
Yes.
instrument. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's learning even if it's easier when it's you saying, "Hey, it's time for you to move on," than it is for right? Then someone else will be like, "Hey, it's time for me to move on." You're like, "Wait a second."
Yeah. So easy.
So we can acknowledge that too, but then if we can then like I said, the inner child healing part of it is like you be the support for yourself that you wish you had gotten. You be that tender landing spot for the feeling of rejection and sadness, and then respond, right? Like take care of that emotional side and then respond from that place of, you know what? They did. They got what they needed.
Yeah.
And now, they're in a different phase of life and things are changing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all okay.
It is okay. It is okay.
Yeah.
And when you raised your prices, everyone was okay, right?
Everyone was
Like,
okay.
everyone was okay. And
Yeah.
now you're making a little bit more each month.
Yep.
How does that feel?
I feel it feels better. It feels like I have a little bit more to grow the business with. Instead of
Mhm.
just survive the business, it's more now I have a little bit more to, invest in marketing or invest in an admin person or, just kind of help creating more systems and more reach. And yeah, instead of just paying enough for me to live and paying enough for this business to, you know, continue at the brick and mortar. But yeah, it does feel it feels a lot better for
Yeah.
sure.
Good. And because that's like the other side of it, the fear that says, I'm afraid everyone's going to leave, right? That wants to stop you from taking that what it deems as a risk. It shifts when you walk through it. You see, it's like, I see you, I hear you, I know this seems really scary, and we're going to try it anyway. We're going to walk through, we're going to take the step. And then when you get to that other side and see that, oh, it's okay, right? Everything's fine. Um, that is where we can start to build. And so to like go back, like circle it all the way back to the beginning of how do you build a business that you love, that you're passionate about without burning yourself out and just in a like a flames, meteor shooting back down to the earth. um, is to keep taking those steps, right? Is to find the support. So, like, oh, now, yeah, I now have more money to work with. I can get some help, right? And so when we start to delegate, like, all right, I'm going to delegate this thing. And that means, okay, I get to focus on the piece that I love, and I get to put down this piece that was burning me out, right? Because it's not the thing you love isn't burning you out. It's all the other stuff.
Correct. Yes, exactly. It's more, it's more, I get to be creative in my business again. That's what
Mhm.
I like about my business is I like the ability to just create. It's like, we recently rewatched the movie Encanto.
So good.
Isabella just poofs and makes flowers and cactuses and whatever. Cacti. Is it
Cacti,
what?
yes.
Been a while since I needed to use a plural of cactus. But that's what business. That's the magic of business for me. That's what makes me come alive. It's like I can create something out of nothing. Poof!
Mhm.
Like there's this beautiful flower. Wow, I did that. And to go back to that role of creating, to me, that's where I feel really fulfilled in my work and helping others in their lessons even to be creators, and co-creators. I think, yeah, that really, so being able to fund that, I guess, so I can continue in that role is a huge relief.
Yeah. Yes, and that's it. That's the magic. Like, it's not, um, people I have yet to meet an entrepreneur who did everything perfectly from the word go, right? And had, like, all the exact right team members and just got to be in their zone of joy and genius without like, all the time from the very start. It is so rare that that could happen, right? If you're being funded by some I mean, like, not that it could never happen, I'm not putting that out there either, but the reality is that most of us start doing most of the things. We start wearing all the hats, and it takes some time. It should not take time for you to make money to pay yourself. Right? That should be written in at the very beginning that, like, you're gonna pay yourself from your business. I truly believe that. But it does take some time for you to figure out what roles need to be filled, what are the things that actually that you need to do and that other people can do for you. That does take time, and it's gonna fluctuate over time, and that's okay. And so to, like, give yourself the permission that, like, all right, this feels a little chaotic at the moment. It's okay. I'm figuring it out. I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. And we're going to start, like, I know marketing is not what I want to do. So I know I'm going to give that away.
Yeah.
I know, teaching group piano, I want to bring someone in to do that. So we're going to work on that step. Right. And so it's this constant evolution. If you allow yourself to evolve past the burnout, you will make it. You will make the choices, you'll allow yourself to make the choices um, that will bring in the right support and to charge enough, right? Value yourself, value your services, at the right rate that will allow you to grow.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast for music schools, and they were talking about how you want ultimately, I think it's tricky because personally, your business feels like an extension of who you are. It's really hard to kind of see it as a separate entity,
Mhm,
apart outside of you. But at the same time, they were saying how you want to think of it as instead of you serving the business serving you. And that's
mhm.
such a huge mindset shift, because if I just ask myself, well, how can the business serve me better? I can give you so many, ideas about it. Anyway, but I just kind of wanted to cap off the conversation with that. Is the
Yeah,
business serving you? And that I'm still processing that. I think we all are. And then it's interesting too, just how you continue to evolve as your business evolves. Every year it's like a new you that has to show
yeah,
up,
mhm, yep,
and that means new rates and new changes, because things are always flowing. So,
Yes, I love that. Yes, every year, right? A new you is here and a new yeah, like bringing new life
mhm,
in, allowing for things to change. Um, it's just super
yeah,
important allowing it.
allowing things to change. That's exactly what we need to hear. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I hope that this was one, I hope it was helpful for you, Svetlana,
It was
and
amazing.
good. And then for everyone else who is listening, yeah, I would love to hear your stories, pricing, um, learning how to value yourself appropriately if you still haven't gotten there. That is absolutely, a thing that I work with people on, is figuring out, pricing and what is my life cost? What is my business cost? How do I then create the offers that will work, that will actually make all of these numbers work for me? Um, it there's some math involved there, right? And so that's another place where I support people. But I would love to hear anyone's stories of how they have experienced this. Have you been through the fear? Are you feeling the fear and not making the step yet? Like, I'd love to hear about it. So as always, you can reach me at Hannah, Hannah, at expansiveceo.com with any of that, or, leave a comment on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you follow. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, Svetlana, for these fireside chats. I think they're so much fun, such a
Yeah,
different energy to the episode.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Any last words?
We're all in it together.
Oh, we
You know?
are. It is
Yeah,
true. It is true. Yes, the more we can support and uplift each other and cheer each other on,
yeah,
you know, it's just so I feel like that's the energy we need, right?
yeah, exactly.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, Hannah, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.